men typically tend to get aroused quickly. They can be aroused through visual stimulation or through imagining something sexual, whereas women need more touch. They are tactile.
Unconsummated marriages are marriages where couples have never had penetrative sex. Many Indian marriages remain unconsummated for several years for a number of reasons. It is a subject not many couples talk about or even admit to. This silhouette confession of a lady's account of her unconsummated marriage has been shot by Bangalore-based 4C Productions.
Parents are worried about their
I'm a woman in my late 30s. I've been married for 10 years. My marriage has still not been consummated. I have a fairly good marriage. That adds to the feeling that, but why? Why is it that in such an important, fundamental aspect, things are not working out? You start wondering, how come he's not making an initiative? Is there something wrong? Is there something wrong with me? Is he having an affair? Am I not attractive enough for him? Over a period of time, all these questions in your head makes you lose your willpower. And it's a vicious cycle. When you lose your willpower, your self-esteem goes down. When your self-esteem goes down, you lose your willpower. It's not an exaggeration to say that motherhood is part of making you what you are as a woman. And then you're missing out on that. To put it bluntly, you feel totally screwed up. You feel like shit. The logical question is, if you're going through all that, why not seek a solution? You realize that this is so strange, this is so bizarre. How do I even go and tell a therapist? There was one counselor who told me, you ought to consider yourself so lucky that your partner didn't leave you. When I went to a therapist who finally just lent a patient ear without judging me, he also told me that I had this condition called vaginismus. There is still a communication gap between my husband and myself. But somewhere we have both been caught in this whole cycle of procrastination. The sex drive is something very strong. No matter how much you might quell it, it just crops up. And then you want to tell yourself, forget morality, forget conventional social norms. Why don't I just seek it outside? Sometimes it's also funny. You're meeting your friends after a long time, and we women tend to discuss our intimate details of our life. There's this friend who goes like, you know what, I think I'm rediscovering it all. My husband and I are at it like 3 times a day. Someone else says, oh, you know what, I'm like over and done with it. I've had enough. And I'm sitting there pretending like, yeah, I know it all. I know what you're going through, but I know deep down that it's all such a big lie. You laugh about it, but then again, you ask yourself, shit, what am I doing?
Dr. Sandeep Deshpande specializes in psychosexual medicine and was part of the psychosexual medicine service in Leeds in the UK and has been practicing in Bangalore for the past 8 years. He joins us on Zen Brain. Thank you very much for joining us on Zen Brain, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for having me over, Shruti.
Your first thoughts on this silhouette confession, and as a sex therapist, in your practice, how common is this issue of unconsummated marriages?
Well, I must thank the maker of this, Bala. It's hard hitting. Everything that has been shown in the confession is true to reality. When I started my practice here in Bangalore about 8 years ago, I was in for a bit of a shock. I have met quite a few couples, and surprisingly, some of them have waited for about 6 or 8 years before they seek any professional help. Yes, it's there. Unfortunately, we don't have credible data to say how big a problem this is, but it definitely is an issue.
There's no data because no one really is willing to speak openly about it also.
That is true, Shruti. Getting information in the field of sexuality is a challenge the world over.
In your practice, what are some of the reasons for these unconsummated marriages?
Let's quickly define unconsummated marriages here. It's more a legal term than a medical term. A couple who have never been able to have penetrative sex class it as an unconsummated marriage. In my clinical practice, I have come around to divide the causes of unconsummated marriages into three broad categories. There are his causes, the her causes, and their causes, the shared problems.
His issues may include erectile dysfunction, which is lack of penetrative sex due to inability to get or sustain an erection. This could be due to physical or psychological conditions and can cause stress, relationship strain, and low self-esteem. Premature ejaculation, orgasm and emission of semen before or shortly after beginning sexual intercourse. Common causes may be due to underlying diseases like hyperthyroidism or non-disease individual variation and even sexual inexperience, or sexual performance anxiety. Her issues could include a very common occurrence in women worldwide, which is vaginismus, which is pain and fear of penetrative sex. Spasms in muscles in and around the vagina make sex painful for women with vaginismus and sometimes even impossible. Another reason could be an inability to reach orgasm, which could be due to a woman's inability to relax and enjoy sex. It could also be due to past traumatic experiences, not enough stimulation, premenopause, and depression. Another reason could be lack or loss of sexual desire. Her issues may also be due to unpleasant prior sexual experiences with partners or a history of sexual abuse. Their issues can affect both partners and prevent them from consummating their marriage. Lack of sexual awareness, fear of penetrative sex or sexual phobia, history of physical or sexual abuse, PTSD, that is post-traumatic stress disorder, or distorted perceptions and beliefs around sex. Discomfort with touch, intimacy, partners or own body, lack of attraction, lack of privacy, withholding penetrative sex to avoid conception, sexual preference or homosexuality. If a spouse is asexual and does not feel the need to have sexual relations, addiction to porn is a big reason in these times, sexual desire disorder or sexual aversion, and lack of psychosexual or medical intervention.
Often it does turn out that one of them might be carrying more of the symptoms, but they both are equally affected. Recently, I met this couple where she had this extreme fear of penetrative sex. There is a condition called vaginismus.
There may be a number of reasons for vaginismus: medical conditions or surgery, age-related changes, accident or injury to the vagina, abuse or PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, temporary discomfort due to lack of lubrication, sexual fears and phobias, anxiety, stress or even depression, partner issues, or cultural attitudes towards sex.
Husbands of women with vaginismus, again, come in two ends of a spectrum. There is the husband who says he'll wait patiently, and over a period of time, if she has had some therapy and treatment and has overcome the vaginismus, he might end up developing problems with his erection. So a variety of causes. Generally for men, there are these performance anxiety issues where they are worried about getting a good erection, sustaining one, or men who come too quickly, something that we call as premature ejaculation. Among women, in addition to the fear of penetration, there is also the lack of sexual desire. One or both of the partners might have fear of getting pregnant, so they don't want to try. That reminds me of another couple recently. They have been married for about 4 years, and they told themselves that the first 3 years they do not want to have a child, so they did not attempt having penetrative sex. And when they wanted to consummate the marriage, they had great difficulty. I think I'll end by saying that a lack of sexual knowledge, sexual literacy, as I call it, also forms a huge part of unconsummated marriages.
Let's talk about sexual literacy. There's one thing about talking about reproduction and reproductive health, and it's another thing talking openly, having open discussions about sex and sexuality. What can we do now?
Need of the hour. There are a whole host of ways in which lack of sexual literacy presents itself. Sadly, our education system doesn't permit sexuality education. In fact, the correct terminology is SRE, sexuality and relationship education. So sex education is not about how to have sex. In fact, that is something that is not covered in sex education. That to me forms the first point of contact in terms of developing sexual literacy. So we have a generation of adults who have grown up having a lack of sex education. When I was growing up, there were magazines, and the brave few during our early adulthood would sneak out and manage to get a pornographic video, and that formed the basis of sex education, sadly. Now let's fast forward that to how kids are learning, or how adolescents and young adults are learning. That's through the internet. And I can go on and tell you how skewed the knowledge of the young adults and young couples has become as a result of viewing pornography or expecting to enact what they see. So change has to come about at multiple levels.
I want you to hold that thought, because we'll come back to porn, and that's a huge subject for us, and I do want to cover that.
Okay.
But I want to just get back to what you said earlier, which is fear of penetrative sex. As a woman growing up in this country, I do know that there is a sense of fear around the sexual act itself. As a sex therapist, how many people suffer from this fear of penetration? And how to get over it, actually?
That's a very useful question. See, if I had a couple sitting in front of me right now, and I sense that their knowledge and awareness is limited, or there is this notion of pain or discomfort, and that can range from not wanting penetrative sex to the extreme end where the lady might not be comfortable undressing at all.
The mind-body connection is such that even if the mind says yes, the body is unable to get past the cycle of pain that starts with anticipating painful sex, followed by spasms in muscles in and around the vagina, leading to the tightening of the muscles, preventing penetration. Experiencing pain further contracts the muscles around the vagina, leading to the body bracing for pain. So basically, the pain would lead to lack of arousal, leading to a woman avoiding sex altogether, followed by a loss of sexual desire or the lowering of her libido. So her brain now associates sex with pain, and the cycle gets repeated.
Now, there could be again multiple reasons. What messages the person received as they were growing up. So let's say if there is a young lady who was told by other people that it is going to be extremely painful, or her early experiences, and unfortunately, even till date, women are subjected to sexual abuse. So early experiences like those can also scar their minds and make them fear and worry about the act itself. It is useful to let the couple know that sexual activity doesn't mean penetrative sex only. So I begin by telling them that sex is on a broad spectrum. Only one end of the spectrum is intercourse. The long end of it, I like to call it outer course. So this could be hugging, kissing, touching, several things that the couple would like to do. There is a man-woman difference. Men typically tend to get aroused quickly. They can be aroused through visual stimulation or through imagining something sexual, whereas women need more touch. They are tactile. So a man needs to know this difference and not rush into the act of intercourse. Interestingly, if you read the Kama Sutra, there too, Vatsayana talks about a gentle and a gradual introduction, wherein in a stepwise fashion, they write about getting to the act of intercourse. So it is important for the mind to be relaxed because, coming from the city of Bengaluru, software and hardware is a term everyone understands here. So sexual activity is not a hardware activity. It starts in the mind. The body needs to relax. Both men and women need to get aroused, and then they proceed to the act of penetration. There's also this great myth that couples should have intercourse the first time they try, or what we call as the first night syndrome, which again puts undue pressure. So I tell couples who are to be married, sometimes they come for premarital counseling, that they should take it slow and easy and not rush into it. Sexual activity is not just for having babies. I try to bring in the notion of recreation, relaxation, and relational. So recreation and relaxation are understandable. They are ways to de-stress oneself. It is also an act of giving pleasure to your partner and receiving it. So it has to be reciprocal. And finally, good sexual relationship fosters good couple relationship. Bringing all these together and trying to help the couple support each other would be the way forward. I've got two left feet, not great at all in dancing, but I tell the couples that sexual activity is like a tango or any couple dance. So they need to support each other. They need to work as one team. Otherwise, they'll be stepping on each other's toes. So going back to the unconsummated marriages, I tell the couples that if one of them comes as a patient, my assessment is generally incomplete. I've only seen one half of the couple, so I need to see the other person as well. For example, the lady in the silhouette confession looks like she has vaginismus. So I would invite her with her husband the next time, and he would be part of the process of recovery, which is what is called as couple sex therapy. So sexual education forms the cornerstone in helping a couple, especially a lady, extending on the topic of vaginismus, which is one of the commonest causes for fear of pain during intercourse. A lot of women grow up with the notion that the vagina is a hole. So I become a little livid in the consulting room and I say, look, this is a hole and this is a hole. It can only admit so much. We don't call the mouth as a hole. It's an opening. So we have a voluntary control over how much we can open. So similarly, while there is no complete voluntary control over the vaginal opening, there are certain processes that happen. There's one called ballooning or tenting, vaginal tenting it is called, wherein if a woman is relaxed and is able to partake in the act of intimacy, the vaginal opening tends to balloon up and there is natural lubrication. So that itself should aid penetrative activity.
Interesting points that you've brought up. Premarital counseling. I think the problem really is also a lack of sex therapists. Good sex is equal to a good overall relationship. you don't need to necessarily get it right the first time, as you've mentioned. So it is something that couples can work towards. It could be possible that the first time or the second time may not be as great as you thought you saw in the movies or read in the books. So what do you do then?
Absolutely. I think you've nailed it well, because there are so many pressures on youngsters now to get it right the first time. For men to, have a hard erection every single time they get into bed. I can think of some anecdotes where a young man comes to me and says, I have erectile dysfunction. And then he says, I have erectile dysfunction since the 24th of February. So, erectile dysfunctions can be psychological, they can be physical. A physical erectile dysfunction or a hardware erectile dysfunction doesn't start like that on the 24th of February. It is a gradual onset, generally doesn't happen to young men. So the pressures are enormous, and thanks to the messages that they are getting from everyone around them, from their peers. Going back to something you brought up, which is sex and the need to procreate, we are also having some unique problems because of the way our society functions. So mothers and mother-in-laws give the girl maybe a few months after the first 3 or 4 months, or maybe 6 months. There's the constant pressure to when is the good news coming. I knew of a couple where the mother-in-law would mark it on the calendar with a big cross with a red pen on months that she would get pregnant, so that it was visible for her and for all of them at home. They are under a lot of pressure, both from within and without. So all these are real cases, and it's horrifying for me, what the people might be going through. If you have a mother-in-law who marks it on the calendar and says, oh God, you're having your periods again this month. So
when a young couple comes to you, it could be any reason, right? How do you really get down to identifying what the problem is?
See, one of the biggest issues couples have is the ease with which they can approach a professional. Unfortunately, the authorities who govern medical education as well as medical licensing do not have ratified courses for sexual health or sexual medicine. It's a did you know fact. Did you know that you cannot train to become a sexologist in India? Unfortunately, that should change. So even in a Western population, in an urban setting in north of England, where I used to work in Leeds, we did a study to see how long it takes for people to approach professionals. And even there, it took between 2 to 3 years. So people continue to suffer in silence. So that stigma needs to go away. We need to make it easy for individuals and couples to start talking to professionals. There are huge misconceptions about this as well. I was once asked by a patient, will we be asked to perform sexually in front of the therapist? And that was horrifying. No, that doesn't happen. So I, in spite of being a medical doctor, I choose not to examine men and women in terms of examining their genitals. So if they need physical examination, they get sent to the respective professionals, gynecologists for ladies and other medical specialists for men. It is a consultation that begins with a lot of sensitivities. So in the first few minutes, after establishing an initial rapport and a quick introduction and trying to identify who they are, a lot of emphasis needs to be put on confidentiality, terminologies that are used,
I just wanted to reiterate this point of confidentiality, because I think, like you mentioned, there is still a taboo around this topic, and there is still stigma attached to going and seeing a
Yes.
sex therapist. So we'd just like to
Yes.
reiterate here, and perhaps you can reiterate too, that there is a confidentiality clause. Doctors do not reveal anything that is discussed with their patients with anyone else. And so whatever you're discussing with a sex therapist remains confidential. At least credible sex therapists in India will ensure that.
Absolutely, that goes without saying, because these are things that they haven't disclosed to perhaps anyone else. But having said that, let me quickly bring in the notion that the confidentiality clause does have a few exclusions. So, if someone else is at harm, let's say, if this person sitting in front of me is indulging in sexual activity with children, or if someone else is at risk of physical harm, then yes, we do breach confidentiality to ensure safety of public at large. Yes, but by and large, everything we discuss stays with us only.
But let's come back to unconsummated marriages. Now, there could be marriages up to 4 and 5 years which remain unconsummated. It's never too late to seek help. That it can be worked upon at any time.
Very much. So I jokingly tell couples to help relax initially if they say we've been married for 6 years and the marriage is unconsummated. I tell them that you have come 12 years early, because my own personal record is of seeing a couple who were married for 18 years. They had an unconsummated marriage. They approached a colleague who is an infertility doctor to help them have a baby, and she realized that this couple had never had penetrative sex. Turns out she had vaginismus, and with vaginismus, some women have other phobias. Phobias are extreme fears coupled with avoidance. So this lady had fear of heights. She had, fear of insects. So vaginismus was one of the phobias that she had. We managed to successfully treat this couple through couple sex therapy, and they went on to consummate the marriage and have a baby. So telling couples little stories like these puts them at ease, and no, it's never too late to seek help. I also want to bring in the concept of something called as the honeymoon period, thought to be about 1 to 2 years in a new relationship or post-marriage. Now, that is the time when the sexual desire tends to be high for both the couples. Post that, it is bound to show some kind of a mismatch. One of them is likely to have a higher desire at any given time. So if couples stop trying or don't seek help in that period, post the honeymoon period, weeks become months, and before they realize, a few years have passed by. So if there are couples listening to this, they need to talk it out, because one of the things that I have seen commonly which hinders help seeking in unconsummated marriages is blame. So if he ends up blaming her and says it's your fault, you go and seek help, she might get defensive. The converse can also happen. So let's say he is unable to get good erections, and if she ridicules him every time, he ends up losing his desire to initiate any sexual activity, and he refuses to go seek medical help. So it is important to think of this as a shared problem.
I'm guessing that if something doesn't happen between couples in the first go, or they have a problem building up to a healthy sexual life, then it could sort of build into their self-confidence levels also. So it's important to also talk, discuss, communicate between each other, which I think is very important.
Absolutely. Two, three narratives come to my head. The first being men who think that they are less of a man if they are not able to consummate the marriage, let's say. And women typically end up worrying about their partner would still be interested in them, if their husband would leave them for someone else or cheat upon them. It ultimately ends up having making a dent on their self-esteem. It does. Okay, I get couples who have got married, they've had a lavish marriage, they've had an expensive holiday, their honeymoon, and then they end up getting disappointed because they go with a lot of expectations. Things can turn sour after that also. So one of the things that I have come around to spreading by way of message whenever I see anyone in my clinic is to stress upon the idea of reading up, talking to their partners or fiance about sexuality, about their fears, their desires, or to go to a therapist who will be able to speak to them, address a few of the common myths and misconceptions, and saves a lot of misery for the couple as well as for their immediate family.
Doc, now I want to go back to something we started talking about but didn't complete, which is, especially in these times, the point of reference for sex is often porn. And now, Doc, children as young as preteens are exposed to it on the internet. How do you think that's impacting kids now, and how is it showing up in young couples? And if a couple does come to you with an issue like that, how do you resolve it?
The thing about pornography is, I happened to see this documentary on Channel 4 in the UK where they showed a couple in real life as well as would act as a couple in the porn industry. It was shocking for me to hear that it takes them about 8 hours to shoot a 20 or a 30-minute porn movie, which means that there is a lot of preparation that goes on. They use multiple cameras and angles, and they do editing. They probably stop-start and whatnot. Now, young people who watch probably don't get a sense of all this. And there is a hyped up image of the need to have, let's say, a longer penis or a bigger penis for men, or a certain body type and a body shape for women. It all starts from there. And in some of the online consulting that I do, I can't tell you how many times I get asked about pills and lotions and potions for increasing the size of the penis. Well, there is nothing out there. A lot of spurious drugs are being sold under the garb of, increase the size of your penis or improve your virility. So all those kinds of messages are trickling through. Now, that's one. Secondly, the videos cut out on the notion of the act nesting in the broader spectrum of relationship and romantic love, and it is straight away cut down to a physical, mechanical act. Thirdly, problems that arise because of virtual sex being something that young people indulge in, and then they are not able to perform in the real world. There was this couple where he insisted on certain sexual acts that she was uncomfortable being part of. That led to a lot of arguments between them. He was trying to justify and say, look, I've seen this, so a lot of couples are doing it. Why can't we also indulge in it? Up until then, everything seemed okay for them, but this led to a major downfall in their relationship. So the concept of consent, asking, telling, sharing, are not things that one picks up from watching pornography. Then finally, the addictive behaviors and the compulsive behaviors So I can think of this man who would only get aroused to watching women with hairy legs. When he got married, that was the only thing that would arouse him. And unfortunately, his wife wouldn't accept that. So that and many other such examples where men or women who are addicted to porn narrow down to watching only a certain kind of activity, find it very difficult to enjoy sex in the real world. Unfortunately, internet and pornography is not a great teacher.
Porn is not sex, and sex is not to be mistaken for porn. And I think there is a danger when you grow up thinking that is what to expect in your partner. You talked about compulsive behavior, compulsive addictive behavior. How much of that is impacting relationships and will impact relationships in future?
Well, it has already begun to impact sexual relationships. With smartphones being easily available, with high-speed internet being available, there are three things that happen. There is a researcher called Al Cooper who calls it as the AAA engine effect. So pornography has become affordable. Pornography has become, it's anonymous and it is easily accessible now. As people end up spending more time in the virtual world, as addictivity to gaming, internet, social media is increasing, so is the usage and consumption of pornography. So the problem is here to stay, and it is only going to grow. So when couples come for therapy, either premarital or post having a sexual dysfunction, one of the concepts we present to them is something called as the menu-based approach. Rather than fall for a certain, the term we use is called sexual script, which is we do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then end with the sexual act itself. Or those who get addicted and indulge in compulsive behaviors, we tell them to involve a variety of approaches, also called as the menu-based approach.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about this menu-based approach when a couple comes to you and have not consummated their marriage.
Their focus is largely on consummating the marriage, and the more emphasis that they put on it, or the more pressure he puts on himself, the harder it gets. So one of my patients said, as long as it was play, we were having fun. And when it became work, we stopped having fun. So in the menu-based approach, we try and introduce play in the beginning. We tell them not to worry about getting aroused, not to worry about penetration. So a gentle introduction, or rather reintroduction of intimacy, and then building it all the way through to the problem areas and helping them in a systematic way to be able to get through and get over the problem.
Just summarizing this, there could be many reasons for unconsummated marriages. As you mentioned, it could be his problem, her problem, or their problem. It's important to seek help, some sort of intervention to actually try and identify what the problem is, or try and work through it. Intercourse is important, but it is outer course which is even more important. It is not the end of the road for a couple facing an issue like unconsummated marriage. The last, but definitely not the least, is to seek out a credible therapist, a credible sexologist. There are very few. There is no end to this discussion, and I'm glad we've taken the first step in discussing it. I'm sure there will be many questions, but thank you very much for joining me on Zen Brain.
Thank you very much, Shruti. People like you need to take this message out so that people stop suffering in silence. They talk about it amongst themselves. They can approach therapists. They can be helped. Thank you very much for choosing this topic. And clearly, you've done quite a lot of research, and it is showing in the questions that you were asking. So thanks a lot for that.